Welcome to the session. In this session, we will learn about the types of SQL commands and introduction to MySQL. In the previous sessions, we had seen various components of the database management systems, the database, how to design a database, and then how to, especially what are the various types of data models that we had seen in the previous sessions. So, the popular database model is the relational model. So, whenever we store the data using the relational model, in order to retrieve the data, we have to query the database. So, what is a query? Query is nothing but a question to put to the database in order to retrieve appropriate data. So, in order to retrieve the data, not only the DBMS is sufficient, a kind of interactive language is essential, which is called the SQL. The full form of SQL is structured query language. This is the most widely used commercial database language. So, this is the language which gives a kind of interface to the user in the form of a command that he will be giving, and he will be writing the query in order to get appropriate data. So, in this session we will see what are the different types of SQL commands, and the next part we will see the MySQL introduction. Relational algebra provides a concise formal notation for representing the queries, but this particular notation, the formal notation that we provide in the form of mathematical notation, is not sufficient to retrieve the data from the database. So, for that reason we use an interface language called as structured query language to put queries against the data, and then it uses a combination of relational algebra and relational calculus constructs. So, this language uses both relational algebra and then relational calculus constructs in order to retrieve the data. So, these will be the basic constructs which will be helping us to retrieve the data using a query. So, let us see the background. This SQL was developed in 1970 by IBM. The original version named as SQL, and this particular SQL they had designed as a part of System R project. That time they felt that there is a need for the SQL component along with the DBMS. So, this DBMS, inside the DBMS this SQL part will become a component. So, its name was changed to SQL, earlier it was SQL, and then the name was changed to structured query language. Right now in market there are several number of products available to support this SQL language, and then there are various versions. In 1970s it was called as SQL with the like the first version, and in 1886 the ANSI, that is the American National Standards Institute, and ISO published an SQL standard called as SQL 86. Whatever the version those are coming in the market, they end up with the year like SQL 86. Then the next version came in 89, that is called as SQL 89, and following up there was another version, standard version in a 92, 99, and right now most of the products contains the SQL version of 2003. Then in order to have the SQL, this is a kind of interface as we know. Then this interface, whenever we talk to the database, we talk in the form of a command or else a statement. So, there are several statements in this particular SQL language. All the statements are being categorized under various categories, like we have data definition language, data manipulation language, data control language, and then transaction control language. So, whatever the command, suppose if it pertains to the category of defining the data will fall under the data definition language. Suppose if the SQL command is used to manipulate the data, to delete the row, to delete the data, to modify. So, these particular category of commands falls in the data manipulation language. Like suppose if the data is being controlled, whatever the commands comes under those category falls under data control language. Likewise, whenever we apply some sort of transactional language statements, those commands comes under transaction control language. So, whenever you take the name of any command in SQL, that command will falls either of these 4 SQL categories, command categories. Then let us see one by one where these DDL are used. This data definition language provides commands for defining relational schema, deleting the relations and modifying relational schemas. So, here you can see the definition language pertains to the schema design, schema modification. This is not talking about the data inside that particular schema, it is talking about the schema itself. So, whenever we define a relational schema, like for example, student is the schema name, inside that I am taking attributes like student ID, name, address 1, address 2, course, etc. So, all this particular schema design is nothing but I am defining. So, this particular thing create database. So, this particular thing comes under the DDL command. These are used to alter, modify a database or table structure and schema. All the DDL commands are auto committed. So, whenever we write a DDL command, it saves all the changes permanently in the database. So, this particular DDL commands pertains to the relational schemas, not to the data, but relational schemas. Whenever we want to create, whenever we want to delete, whenever we want to modify the relational schemas, these DDL commands will be used. So, some of the examples I had given on the slide, those are creating a table, creating a database comes under DDL command. Altering the table comes under DDL command. Suppose if I want to delete a column or else add a column in the existing table comes under the DDL command. Truncate, then drop. Suppose if I want to drop the table, if I want to delete the whole table, the schema, then that particular command comes under the DDL. Then rename, to rename a table. Suppose if I had put student and then I am changing it to STUD. So, that renaming the table also comes under the DDL command. Then comes the second category of commands called as the data manipulation language commands. These particular data manipulation language commands affects the records in the table. It does not affect the schema as such. However, it affects the records that we store in the table, the data that we store in the table. Suppose if I want to insert the data in the student like SID, I have to give some 1, 2, 3, then name some Rahul, then address 1 Saket, then address 2 address to some Delhi. So, in this way whenever I am inputting some sort of records, this particular command comes under the data manipulation language command. For example, these particular commands are not at all auto committed. It means changes are not permanent to the database. They can be rolled back. Suppose if you had given some data and if you want to roll back to the earlier thing, you can roll back to the. So, earlier DDL was auto committed, but these particular DML commands are not at all auto committed. For example, there are various kinds of commands falls into this category. One is select, to retrieve data from a database, then insert is there, insert data into a table. So, in this particular data we are not at all talking about the schema here, but we are inserting the data or else the records into the table. Then comes the update existing data within a table, then delete records from a table. All these commands comprising wherever they affect the records in the table falls into the category of data manipulation language. The next one is the DCL, data control. we are controlling the data, that is nothing but the access permission to the users. So, DCL commands control the level of access that users have on their database objects. Suppose if I want to grant permission to some table or else permission to the view of a table, so that particular command comes under the data control language. We are controlling the data, we are controlling the users to access the data. So, this particular command comes under the data control language. Suppose if I want to revoke the privileges from one of the users, then that particular command also comes under the data control language. Why? Because we are revoking the permissions or else the privileges from the users. We are granting and we are revoking. So, these particular the set of commands comes under the data control language. This includes commands such as grant, which are mostly concerned with the permissions or else rights and controls the database access rights of the users. The last set of category is the transaction control language. Here committing and rollbacking, these particular commands comes under the transaction control. So, the category of commands which works on the transaction part comes under the transaction control language. Here one is the begin the transaction, that is one of the example that we can give here, and then the commit transaction with the transaction which is recently happened, or else I can roll back the transaction, that command also comes under this particular category. So, with all these 4 categories of commands, the DDL, the data definition language, the data manipulation language, the data control language, then transaction control language, all these constructs or else all these language categories, whatever the commands that we are giving, comprises a kind of SQL support, gives a SQL support to the DBMS. And coming to the examples of relational database management systems, you have Oracle, you have MySQL, you have MS SQL Server, Ingress, Progress, Informix. There are several examples where in which we can quote here. So, along with all these DBMS packages, you will find SQL, embedded SQL or procedural SQL commands embedded into those particular packages. So, every package comes up with the SQL commands, and then they follow various syntax. Suppose if you take the case of DDL statement, for example, you take a create command, create a table in Oracle, that follows a kind of syntax. So, that particular thing starts with create a keyword that is to be used, create table, table name, then braces open, then give the column name, then give the data type. Likewise, you put as many as column names as you can, as that particular table contains, and the data respective data types, and then it should be ended with a semicolon. So, every category of command or every SQL language pertaining to any package follows certain syntax. So, that is the reason why I am giving here an example very much like a familiar example DBMS called as the MySQL in my later on session. So, let us see how the statements looks like. So, these are the category of statements. Let us see this slide wherein which we can find the summary of all the commands. One is DML, DDL, DCL and TCL, and down I had written the various examples of that particular language. Then comes the popular package wherein which we can talk about MySQL. So, using this particular MySQL, I want to teach you the commands that we had discussed in this session. So, suppose if a DDL command is there, how it looks like or how it works in MySQL, or DML commands are, the set of DML commands are there, how it looks like or how it works in MySQL. So, those particular things using this example MySQL DBMS package we can see. Why I had selected the MySQL database package? First and foremost reason that I had selected the MySQL package is it is open source. So, it has an open source license. So, anybody can download from MySQL website and can use. And then the MySQL is an RDBMS package, popular relational database management package, And then this particular MySQL DBMS package is being developed by the community, the open source community, and then it is a very powerful program in its own right. Like it has many features like scalability and flexibility, high performance, high availability, protection is there, security is there. There are several characteristics at par with the popular licensed DBMS. Even in most of the cases, like in Facebook and in most of Flipkart and other companies also, they use this MySQL as their backend. So that is the popularity that this particular DBMS package has. And then the other feature that I can quote over here is it works on many operating systems, like many operating systems like Windows, Unix, Linux. It supports each and every kind of operating system. That is the charm that this particular DBMS has. And it supports many languages also, like PHP with MySQL. That is a good combination in order to design the websites. Perl and then MySQL, it is also a good combination to design some sort of applications. And there are several languages supports this particular MySQL as their backend. It works very quickly, works well even with large data sets. Why I am calling here the large data sets is it works with the commercial databases of a company or a corporate activities, then it can also serve the purpose of a data warehouse. So that is the scalability that it has. It has the capability of working with some sort of corporate assisting applications to till data warehouses it can support. So that is the kind of scalability this MySQL has. And it is very much go along with PHP, the most appreciated language right now for the current web based applications. Then this supports large databases, as I told, 50 million rows and more in a table. So this is the size that it can support. And as it is open source software and it is having the GPL open source GPL license, it allows programmers to modify the MySQL as per their specific requirements. Suppose if I have a specific requirements in my organization regarding the DBMS package and I had selected MySQL. So I can make some sort of tailor-make changes in order to suit my specific environment, that is my company. So this particular feature is only available with the open source software. Otherwise for the product based it may not be supporting the kind of tailor-make changes that we made. Then let us see the characteristics of the strengths of MySQL. One is the scalability and flexibility. It supports the normal databases pertaining to any corporate applications and other things, and also the way it scales is for normal applications also it is suitable, and for the data warehouses also it is suitable. Then comes the flexibility part. Whenever we talk about the flexibility part, we talk about the operating systems, whether this MySQL supports a plethora of operating systems that we have in the market. Yes, it supports Windows, it supports Linux, it supports Unix. So this MySQL supports all kinds of operating systems, all kinds of flexibility is there. So whenever we can, we are comfortable, suppose if a person is comfortable with working on Unix or Linux, he is comfortable using this particular database, or whenever the person is only having the comfortability in the using Windows, that person also can download the Windows version and can use MySQL as the backend. And this MySQL has high performance factors. Whenever we talk about the high performance factors, we talk about the range of applications that it can support. Like suppose if you are having a transaction processing systems in your company or in like in a banking kind of environment, it supports. Or else suppose if you are having a website which is supporting a few billion services per day, then also MySQL supports. So that is the kind of performance it caters to the applications. Then high availability. Coming to the availability part, the time it guarantees round the clock updates, round the clock uptime. So that is the high availability time. You can have 24/7 uptime for this MySQL databases. Then robust transactional support. So, it has the features of supporting the asset properties, like asset property in the sense atomic, A stands for atomic, and then C stands for consistent, I stands for isolated, and then D stands for durable. It supports the asset properties, it supports the row level locking. Row level locking is possible in MySQL, and then it also caters to the distributed environments, distributed environment applications also it caters to. So, this kind of transactional support is available with MySQL DBMS. Then coming to the web and data warehouse strengths, obviously it has. Then strong data protection is the one of the strength of MySQL. Like in the earlier slide I told about the open source, it is having GPL license and the lowest total cost of ownership. This is one of the strength that it has. So, these are the characteristics of MySQL, and this is why I had selected the MySQL as the means of DBMS wherein which we can apply all the commands. So, this is the website wherein which one can go and visit and can download the MySQL DBMS, and then here you can have the download section option there, and from that particular downloads option you can select the DBMS pertaining to the environment that you are working with. Suppose if you have the Windows environment, then you can download the Windows MySQL DBMS, or else whatever the environment, whatever the operating system you have, you can download those particular versions. So, MySQL on Windows. So, this is the version that is available for the Windows environment. MySQL provides you with a suite of tools for developing and managing MySQL based business critical applications on Windows. This particular MySQL on Windows options includes an installer, and then MySQL for Excel, a notifier, and then MySQL for the Visual Studio kind of packages, and then MySQL Workbench. So, these are the various options or various downloads, those are available on the under the category of Windows, MySQL on Windows. And then for .NET platform there is a kind of MySQL connector is there, for ODBC it is there, and then you have the enterprise edition too. So, these particular options are available under Windows, and then this is the website that you have, web page that you have on the MySQL home like option. MySQL on Windows is the website, whatever we were talking, the installer for Windows, then the .NET, and then MySQL for Excel, all these things are available. You can go and download and you can use them, and the whole documentation is also provided over there. You can go through the documentation and then you can install the packages as per the requirements. Then comes MySQL and big data and IoT. So, right now the terms, the kind of thing that we are using is the big data kind of thing and the internet of things. So, this MySQL supports the applications or else the big data and then internet of things platforms also. So, this is the leading open source database for web based and cloud based applications and is integrated with numerous big data platforms. Earlier also we was talking about the data warehouses. So, data warehouses kind of platform, data warehouses kind of applications are also possible, big data applications are also possible, then internet of things applications are also possible, and where in which we can support the backend part using the MySQL. This is the like option that they had provided, MySQL and big data and IoT. Under this option you can see the white papers, the technical papers, and also some sort of downloads available in order to provide you the information regarding the MySQL support to the big data and the internet of things. Then comes MySQL in the cloud. From being the leading open source database for web based applications, MySQL has become the leading open source database in the cloud. Right now nowadays nobody is talking about the the database servers, keeping them in the corporates or in the offices. We are right now talking about the cloud. The basic advantage that we will be getting is the scalability problem is there, and then no need of maintaining the infrastructure over there in our premises. So, that is why we select the cloud platforms, and this particular MySQL in the cloud is also a kind of a leading thing that leading capability that it has. So, it works in the servers, it works in the cloud platform too. So, with this I come to the conclusion of this session. In this session we had studied about the SQL, what is SQL, what are the various commands under SQL, and we had seen the introduction part of the MySQL. In the next session, we will see various commands in MySQL. How can we give the command using DDL, DML, TCL and DCL in MySQL. Those particular things we see in the following session. Thank you.